Welcome to today's live demo. In episode 5 of Posit Cloud Essentials, we're going to be diving deep into using the platform to teach data courses and workshops. If this is your first time watching, my name is Alex Chisholm, and I work on the Posit Cloud team here at Posit. I'm also really excited to have a co-speaker for the first time who knows a lot about the intersection of R and data science and education, really as much as anyone. Mine, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me today. So my name is Mina Chetinkara-Rendell. I'm a developer educator at Posit in the open source team, but I'm also a faculty member at Duke University, and I have been using Posit Cloud for quite a few years now at this point, at times as part of my on-campus teaching, and at times for teaching workshops that are either short-term or long-term workshops outside of here. So I'm happy to share my experiences.
Yeah, that's great. We're very glad to have you here with us today. And before we get into the benefits of teaching with Posit Cloud, I just wanted to say if you have any questions along the way, please drop them into the chat box. We will get to them in real time if we come across them, or we have time at the end to circle back after the demo we're going to be running. So what I'd like to start with actually is before we, as instructors, were lucky enough to have cloud environments to teach, like what life was like. And I want to take you back to a troubling time in 2016 where I tried and failed for the first time to get students in like a data literacy type course up and running with coding. And everybody was really, really excited about the opportunity. So it was kind of disappointing the first time where we had everybody pull up their desktop IDEs, and we spent the entire first class like troubleshooting individual pains that people were going through trying to get up and running. Right. So like I couldn't get the right packages installed. I couldn't find, the files that you're asking me to connect to. What even is a working directory? I'm on a different operating system. Like all of these questions would come up, and it became very difficult to have a starting point for all the students to start at the same place. I'm curious, Mine, from your perspective, like do you have like one or multiple moments of painful teaching experiences from this type of pain?
Yeah, I do. I bet the pain is felt differently from the student side, but as an instructor, I can sort of pinpoint two things. One is when I would try to teach with IDEs sort of like on installed individually on student machines. One thing I realized is that I am not great at troubleshooting on an operating system different than my own. So I've been a Mac user for quite some time now. As I've been learning to use R and RStudio, so I'm pretty familiar with when you install things where they go and how to troubleshoot them. And I have always felt awful when a student comes up to me with a Windows machine, and what I tell them is, I don't know how to help you. Oh, but I can help your friend who has an operating system similar to mine. Or sometimes some students will have their operating systems in a different natural language than English or a language I speak. And that usually feels really bad too when I can't help them. Another thing, though, is that for my classroom teaching, I have been using some cloud version of RStudio, I want to say forever. Back in the day, RStudio, the company, would actually, allow a few instructors to sort of run a hosted version of what was then RStudio server, I suppose. And I would use that. But something I had not realized is that when you distribute a data file to students and you're teaching in a computer lab, so the machines are not the students and not your own, but the universities, students might have no idea where the downloaded files go. So even if you think that you're 100% prepared to teach, you've even sort of set up your computing environment and you think things are ready to go, you go to the computer lab and the first thing you're faced with is, where are the files are downloaded? And I remember spending about 20 minutes trying to get started with a class thinking, this is not where I thought we would choke. So these things do happen. And it seems like it's very difficult to be prepared to teach in an environment different than one that you can access.
Yeah, that's completely fair and accurate. I think that's where Posit Cloud has made teaching a lot easier for a lot of people. In my role here, I've worked with a lot of individual instructors that are kind of running their own course within a university. Also with entire departments that have multiple instructors that are coming aboard, and people that are just running workshops. But this ability to get students up and running with this same environment, the same files from the get-go, really has just saved a lot of time on the instructor side. But as you mentioned from a student side as well, it doesn't lead to these burdens right away, which can be frustrating when you're just learning out, which takes away some of that excitement. So we feel that, by finding a way to build a course or build a workshop around Posit Cloud, you're not only saving the time and effort of getting people in this unified environment, but you're able to bring people into this space where the system's going to scale with you. And if you have more students, or if you have more instructors, they can kind of work into that flow as well. And when we're thinking about, like, how do you go about and just deliver any kind of educational course, broadly speaking, it likely follows something like this, right? You're trying to set up with some kind of learning objectives. What do you hope to impart to students? What do you want the outcomes to be? Why do you believe that they are important? From that, you're putting together course material. What's going to put them on the best path to acquire, to achieve these learning objectives? Getting into content distribution, being able to take a project or take some code or just take a concept and put it in front of people at the right time. And then finally, the ability to support and assess along the way. So, was it effective? Where were the pain points? What individual issues came up that needed to have to be looked at a little bit more closely. So I'm curious, Mine, like, does this align with like your mental model as you're preparing courses? Specifically data courses, which might be a little bit different than teaching something that doesn't have a technical or a coding base perspective.
It aligns very well with the instructor I aspire to be. But I think that sometimes things go a little bit differently where I find myself sort of circling more than once through this, which is that, creating course materials, that seems like the type of thing you should be doing at the beginning of the semester, for example. However, for me, it's usually something that I'm doing throughout the semester. To be perfectly honest, at times it's because I just don't have everything ready at the beginning, but also because sometimes, I read about a cool feature in a new released version of a package or something new with Corto. And what I want to do is I want to be able to show in class the next day this new thing I've learned about. So that might mean that now I want, the most recent version of a package to be installed on the environment where my students are going to be doing the computing, and to be able to have access to do that myself as opposed to going through IT has always been really nice. And also distributing content as well. I don't necessarily have every single homework assignment, every single in-class exercise prepared and ready to go to be sort of like distributed at once to students. So usually these things unravel throughout the semester. I also find that students find it overwhelming to be delivered everything at once, and it allows me to pace things a little bit better based on how class went. So that flexibility of making things visible to students at a particular rate is another thing that I really like.
Yeah, I'm curious, what courses are you typically teaching? We talk with a lot of people that are teaching psychology or economics or statistics or getting into data science. Where is your focus?
So I am a faculty in the statistics department. My primary focus for teaching is introductory education. So that's introductory statistics or introduction to data science. The courses I've taught most regularly, most recently, have been introduction to data science using the data science in a box curriculum. But I also teach data visualization courses, both at the introductory and advanced level as well. I teach a few other things here and there too, but these have been sort of like the ones that I teach most regularly, and usually quite large classes.
What is quite large from your point of view?
Well, next semester it'll be almost 300 students, so that's large for my university. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. Yeah, digging in a little bit to these themes a little bit more. So starting out with the learning objectives, one of the courses that I taught years ago was just this data literacy type course, data as a second language. So I knew I had 3 units, right? I wanted people to understand what data is. I wanted them to be able to manipulate it in more sophisticated ways. Then I also wanted them to be able to go out and communicate to other people. So when thinking through, once I had that bad experience trying to do things, with everybody on their own laptops, I moved into, what could Posit Cloud kind of like deliver, and how could I take some of this content and put it into some of the functions and features on Posit Cloud. So the first part was, like, what can I teach within RStudio IDE? Later, Posit Cloud has added Jupyter Notebook, which is still in a beta, but for those instructors who do want to have some native Python coding material, they can do it through that. And then where am I going to get my data examples? How are they going to be brought into the system? Are we going to go out and just import CSV files? More recently, Posit Cloud added data connections this year, which makes it easier to connect to databases, which from what I understand are not often taught in a lot of data courses, especially at the undergrad language level, in terms of just connecting and being able to start doing manipulation. But we found some really great public databases that are out there that allow you to put in a Postgres connection, make that connection, and start performing analysis on it, which is great. Mine, are you typically working with flat files at this point? Are you using data files from within packages? What is your go-to source?
Mostly flat files. We start with data files from packages. So my teaching style is that the first thing we teach is data visualization. So we sort of start by visualizing data that is already not necessarily, I would say, cleaned up, but in a data frame format, let's say. So already in R, the variable types are what you expect them to be, like factors or dates and stuff like that. So that's why we start with data sets and packages, and then we take a step back and import data primarily from flat files. So Excel or CSV files or Google Sheets is another one that we tend to import data from. I don't teach databases much, but another thing we do teach is web scraping. So then in that case, the data is coming from an unstructured source and then using code getting structured into a data frame.
Yeah. Yeah, great. And then bringing this into what the course would look like in Posit Cloud. Posit Cloud, I think, is powerful from an educational point of view because it's based around this notion of a space. So you create an account, as we're going to see in a demo in a few minutes. You're able to create this dedicated space. You can use it for whatever you want. You can bring in specific people. So when thinking through it from the point of view of bringing in course materials, you can make a space, you can bring in new projects, you can create RStudio projects or Jupyter projects. You can now publish some outputs as well to the space. If you have Quarto, let's say, maybe summarizing the semester's content. And then once you do this, you're able to manage all the content that you have within this given contained environment. So once you have it there, you want to go out and be able to put it in the hands of students. So there are a couple of ways we'll look at where you can invite students to your space directly, controlling what they are able and not able to do, and then what they are able and not able to see at different moments. So Mine mentioned earlier, like not overwhelming students and throwing up every single thing from the semester. We have some features on Posit Cloud that can make that easier as well. And then at the end of all this, like once you have students that are in the space, they're able to access your content and go along and learn kind of in real time with you. Your ability as an instructor to go into a student's project, be able to run the code, maybe see what is going wrong, potentially fix issues or work collaboratively, make comments. And then, at the end of all of this, right, we were talking about, how do we assess and evaluate work? And I know that, we don't have actually built-in functionality right now on Posit Cloud to really support the grading aspect of things. So I'm curious, Mine, in all these courses that you've taught over the years, like what is your process for evaluating, learning outcomes from this type of material?
So usually it really depends on the course that I'm teaching. In my intro stat courses, the evaluation, actually in any of the courses I teach, the evaluation itself happens outside of Posit Cloud. So students submitted using whatever course management system we're using. So in my introductory statistics course, that is happening on Gradescope, for example. So they render their Quarto document to a PDF file that they then export out of that Posit Cloud project, and then they upload it to Gradescope, and that's where the grading is happening, basically, and feedback is being given there as well. With my intro data science courses, there is also a Git and GitHub component to the course. So in that case, everything is submitted as a GitHub repository, and the evaluation, depending on the course, is either done there or on Gradescope as well. the way we've been, like for courses where I teach Posit Cloud, the way it has come into play has been more on the sort of the support side, the go into a, like not the assessment side, but the support side, being able to sort of go in and diagnose for the students what the issue might be. And I will say that that's usually not like a first thing I offer to the students. You know, even if we're physically together in office hours, but also if we're not and we're talking on like a course discussion forum or something, I try to get them to articulate what the issue is. But sometimes it turns out that we're not getting anywhere with that. And the student is getting more frustrated because they sort of don't have the right terms and I can't see what they're doing. And maybe they're not sharing like a full screenshot with me of what's happening. So being able to just peek in, not necessarily always to fix the issues, but to understand what the issue is and then leave the space and then articulate to them, here is what you might want to look into, is really, really nice.
Yeah, that's great advice. What I'd like to do now, before we get into a live demo, is just talk a little bit about the two ways that you might be able to set up instructor-style accounts on Posit Cloud. If you are like an individual instructor or you are running workshops, you can create an individual account. You can go up and if you have 5 different courses, you can make 5 different spaces, or you can use one space and reuse it for different groups and cohorts of students that are coming through. If you are part of a wider group within your institution or your university, we have organizational accounts where there can be sort of central management of the instructors that you would like to have part of that. So this means like centralized billing and also the ability to sort of monitor and see who's doing what in which space. So what I would like to do now is hop over to Posit Cloud. So I'm going to switch into the browser here. And I'm going to go ahead and log in, and we'll start just by looking at the individual approach to doing this. And what I always encourage, like if you're new on this call and you haven't been in Posit Cloud yet, there are free accounts that are available, and it's the best way to sort of experience and feel what Posit Cloud is like, because we don't gate a lot of this functionality by different tiers of service. Like if you were to have a paid plan eventually, you would have like more compute hours and you'd have more compute power. But all the building blocks, such as spaces and projects, are going to be there on a free account as well. So let me go ahead and log in now. And the first time that you get into Posit Cloud, you're going to get to a relatively plain page that is known as your workspace. And here you could start building projects, and you could see the specific project that you might be working on. But what you can't do in this first space is invite others to collaborate with you. And of course, we're looking at education here. So we want to have students. We want to have a back and forth of our content. And for this, we're going to go to this notion of space. So if I click on the end and I scroll down, I can create a new space. And maybe we call this, Stat 250. Most people won't have a drop down here, but if you have multiple accounts you can access, you can choose one here. I'm going to go to my individual personal account and just create this space. So we have a new course area. You can see that 2 new tabs popped up. I have both data, which are these data connections that I mentioned earlier. So if you do work into your curriculum, some ability to go out and touch a real database, you can set up the credentials here so that students don't need to be entering these themselves over and over again. But more importantly, we have this member tab. And here's where we're going to be able to have a couple of different ways to bring in different people into our space to engage with our content. And we'll do that in a few moments. But first, I'll start off with like the core functionality, right? You see this drop down new project. If I click on this, I see 4 options. I can either create a project from a template. And if I were to do this, you're going to see a few things. First, you're going to see that we don't have a template defined specifically for our new space yet. We could do that, and we'll do that in a few moments' time. Or you could create a new project from a template that really Posit has put together for you. So for instance, we have data analysis in R with the tidyverse. If you were to go into that, you'd be able to see a markdown document that talks through different functionality within the tidyverse for basic exploratory analysis. And all the packages, all the data that you would need for those examples would already be included in there. But the most common thing I think teachers do, they go through and they create a new RStudio project. And maybe this will be called, week 1 EDA, depending on what we're teaching. It's going to take about 15 to 20 seconds to go ahead and spin up a new instance specifically for your project. And then once you're in it, I would say 95% of what you'd expect on RStudio, IDE on your desktop, you'd be able to achieve and accomplish here as well. So you can go ahead and upload files from your local environment. You can make those database connections either through the ones that we defined earlier through Posit Cloud, or a new one through other database drivers that happen to be available. We could build in markdown files, code. Again, we could bring in data to support all of this, and essentially building up what you want in week one for your students to be able to engage with. I also won't publish anything here, but I'll show you the functionality we have as well. So maybe you're working with a Shiny app. What we can do is build up the Shiny app, and we'll just look at the base one that comes included. We're going to have to go out and get all the packages first, and that's what it's downloading right now. And then once that is complete, I'm going to go ahead and call this test. I'm going to make sure that when we run this app, we're going to do it in our window so we can see it within the pane. So we can see right away our interactive Shiny application. And because we're all part of this same unified experience on Posit Cloud, if I wanted to publish this to my space for other students to see, you could do that. So again, we're just going to go ahead and install the required packages to make this publication published to Posit Cloud. And you can see by default where it's asking you to go is to the space that we're putting it in. So we won't do that now, but if we did and we go back to our content list, we would see both the project that we just created, the week one EDA, and we would see the project. Now, at the moment, we're missing two key components to teaching a course, right? We're missing students to look at things, and we're also missing the ability for students who might be here to see what you've worked on. So this first RStudio project, if you wanted to put that in the hands of students in your space, you can see that it's marked private. We're going to go into settings, and we're going to go to access. We're going to change that private to space members. So that's the first thing that you would do to put the content in front of students that are in the space. And then we have two options here that can be very relevant, I think, when teaching a course. The first is making this project an assignment. And if I were to click on this, you can see that there is an assignment button that comes with that week one EDA. And now when a student were to join the space, they would come in and it would change to, for them, they would see start. So they know that there's an action on it. They would click start. It would make a copy of the project specifically for them that then they could interact with without risking, what you put together in your first one. It's a safe environment that they can go back and they can create it again and again and again if they wanted to. We also have the ability now with a new feature called templates to turn this into a specific template for this space. So if I click on template, it's going to take away the assignment functionality. I can make this template something that we can get from that initial list of start a new project with templates. I can also make it the default for every single RStudio project that comes from this space. But let's just go ahead and save it as template just to show you where this would now pop up. It becomes a template within your space, and any student that came, because it's available for all space members, when you click on new project from template, you can see week one EDA. So there are a couple of different ways you can do things now that we have template functionality as well. We'll look at in a few moments another example of using templates maybe to surface all the data sets you want to be able to share out throughout a semester. And if a student wants to create a new project from those core data sets, they could again come back to this template. Minnie, I'm curious, when you're setting up courses on Posit Cloud, are you typically using assignments or templates or nothing at all?
Both. So I definitely use a template, particularly because there's I always use the tidyverse packages, and I like being able to, I teach with library tidyverse. So I want to make sure that we have all of the tidyverse packages installed, even if for a given lesson, we may not be using all of them. And so that's one of the things I put in my template for sure. And also, rendering a Quarto document with our code in it requires like knitter to be installed and stuff. So I make sure that all of that is installed in the template. So that's the first thing I set. And every once in a while throughout the semester, I'll update the template too, so that going forward, like we use the new packages. But usually that stays for the semester. And then for each day that I teach, so this semester I'm teaching an introductory statistics course where we're using Posit Cloud, and every single day we have an application exercise in the class. So that's like a live coding thing. So I have stubs of code that I share with the students in a Quarto document, and then we sort of improve upon them during the in-class exercises. Those are set as assignments, and I make them visible sort of shortly before class. And then their homework assignments and stuff are also distributed as assignments. What I like is that it nicely contains them for the students. So in my opinion, it's sort of almost an improvement above working with the ID for learners, because the idea of switching between projects in the local ID is, I think, something that comes with experience, versus in Posit Cloud, to switch between like different sets of documents, you have to switch the project. So I feel like it teaches you to think about projects earlier than you might otherwise, which is, I think, a benefit.
Yeah, I think you're right. Let me jump now from the space we just built into one that looks a little bit more filled in. And we don't have time, obviously, during a quick demo to put this together, but I'm going to go into spring 2022. And here I've got a course. It's filled out. You can see that we've got a bunch of files here. A lot of them are repeating in names. The reason for that is that these are coming from students who have made copies of these assignments. But you can see right away we've got more going on in this space. So maybe even a little bit overwhelming at first. So if you were the professor and you came in maybe mid-semester and you saw all of your students' interactions with a bunch of different files, we have ways to filter this down as well. So if you click on your content, now you see essentially what you have made and what you have released to the group. So we have 2 assignments. You can see manipulating data, which is available for all space members, understanding data, available for all space members. And then we have a third one, communicating data, which is still private. So right now, a student, which we'll see in a few moments, who comes into the space wouldn't see this because it's not yet available for them. And we have the 2 assignments, as I mentioned. We also have this template. And the template is just an RStudio project that has a bunch of different data sets that if a student ever wanted to build a project on with those libraries that Mine mentioned, and with a bunch of data sets that they can test it out, they could, because we've made it a template, go to the new project from template and see sample data sets, and again, create that project with all of those assets pre-included. So what I'd like to do now actually is show you what the membership tab looks like. So you saw on the content list that a few of the content items were matched back to individual students. And you can see here right now in our course, we have me, and then we have student A, B, and C. Each of them are given this contributor level of permissions. And if you click on initial role here on the far right, you can see who can do what. But typically, if you are the instructor, you're going to be the admin on the account. And if you have students that are joining, you want them to be contributors. They're going to be able to engage with the material you've put up there, but they're also going to be able to create their own projects when they want to and play around, again, in a safe way that isn't going to break anything. There are also 2 ways to bring members to your space. So if I click on Add Member, the first thing that's going to come from this, especially if I click on Invitation Required and I click Add Member, I'm going to have an email address. So I could put in a new individual's email address. I could tell them specific information in the copy of the email for them to come join the space. They would receive an email. They would click the link. They would come to Posit Cloud. If they already have an account, they could simply just go ahead and accept it. If they don't, they'll be required to sign up for a free version, and then they can come in on most education plans. When you start having a lot of people in your course, you might want to just go ahead and use a sharing link. So here we have an anonymous link that I can copy. And now on my clipboard, I've got this link. I can give it to students in a chat or via a generic email. People could follow this and then come into the space. And what I'd like to do now is take that link and show you what it looks like from a student's perspective who received this invitation. So I need to switch my screen here, and I'm going to bring it now to my other window. Okay, I think you can see it. So here we are on Posit Cloud on a student laptop, let's imagine. I'm going to paste in the invitation to join that space. I do already have an account on this system, so I'm going to go ahead and log in. And now Gustav is going to be able to get an invitation to this space. Are you willing to join? If the answer is yes, you come in. The first thing you see is some about text that the instructor was able to put in the space specifically. And then the next time they log in, they won't go there. They'll go straight to this content area. And we can see a few things. We can see that I've got 4 pieces of content. And I've already joined this space under this account, which is why this one is saying continue. But if you look at manipulating data, like this is something that the student has not yet started. And when they click on this, we can see that a project does open up. It's called manipulating data. It's going to have the initial code in that we want the student to experience and play with. And it will also have all of the packages and data sets that were able to be set up initially. But what this does is it doesn't take your project, the instructor project that you put together, it saves it as their own. So we can see here now we've got manipulating data. It is from that student D. It is currently private, so only they can see it within their space. Only they can see it, as well as the admin instructor can see this content list. And we can see that they can even filter down the information a little bit better to see what's going on in Unit 1 and maybe what's going on in Unit 2. Now, we talked on the other screen about that template. So imagine the student comes into the space and they don't have this thing about data sets. You could say, well, go create a project from a template, and you'll be able to find the different templates that are made available within the space. So if I switch back one last time to the instructor view, and go refresh my member tab, I can now see that I have this new person, this student D, who has joined the space. So I've got 4 students. They're all able to engage with the content that I make available for them. The final thing that I'll show is the usage. So not only are we able to bring people into our space, engage with our content, we're also able to keep a pretty good look at who's doing what and who's being active down to the content level. So you can see this is showing us that in this month, the calendar month, there have been 4 hours of compute associated with projects and outputs in the space. There are 8 unique pieces of content, and there are 4 active members. If I scroll down, we're going to see that we have the instructor and we have students A through C already have some compute time associated with it. Student D just joined, and at the moment they don't have any compute associated with them. But if you were to click on student B, let's say, we can see these 1.14 hours came from 2 different projects, understanding and manipulating data. So we have some usage statistics in here as well. So that primarily is how you can bring your content into a space, engage students, and get them to experience it. I've seen a few questions come in along the way for this specifically. Maybe now let's see if some of these are good to answer at the moment. So Boyan's asking, is there a way to share a project with someone who is not a member of my course workspace? And there are 2 answers to this. One, if you're talking about a course space, the answer is no. You need to be able to invite someone in there as a member, give them the proper visibility to see that. In the personal workspace, there is actually a way to do this. You can make that first personal workspace that we looked at when we logged in. If you were to put something there, you can say share with other cloud users. And then if someone else has a Posit Cloud account, they can be able to access that project. Let me drop into the channel here, the guide. And if you look at the differences in sharing between that personal space and, let's see if I can find the box. I actually don't see where I can drop in a direct reply here, but I'll share it on the YouTube channel through our friend Hannah. Then we'll be able to tell where you can do these specific things. So lastly, we've gone through the live demo. We talked about how we can build a specific data course. We knew from the beginning that this has sort of taken away some of the pain points, both on the instructor side and the student side. We have a lot of uptick in the education community. 17 of the top global universities are either using Posit Cloud as an institution or with individual instructors. We've had thousands of instructors and workshop leaders go through using Posit Cloud for these courses and workshops, and hundreds of thousands of students have started their data science learning path on the tool. It's also quite flexible in terms of how you can get involved. At the moment, instructors are $15 a month. There are a variety of ways that you can go ahead and sign up for accounts. If you're able to use credit cards, we have very, very flexible monthly subscriptions where you can add students, remove students. If you're on an organizational account, you can go ahead and add additional instructors as well. If you're working with very large cohorts, and maybe a purchase order makes more sense for you, we're flexible there as well, and can talk through your needs on a case-by-case basis. In each one, to set up ways to accommodate your student costs, there are three primary approaches. Either you can pay a $5 per student monthly fee for the student. You can have each student pay it for themselves, or you can set up an account, again, through Stripe, through a credit card on the platform that only will go back to the usage within your space. So you would pay $15 for your instructor fee, and then anything above that would just be based upon the compute hours used by students in your space. So again, I encourage you to go to posit.cloud, create a free account, play around with some of the functionality that we looked at today. And really, I think if you haven't tried teaching through a cloud-based system yet, you're in for a real treat, both from the preparation it takes to get all of your content in one place and the ability to bring on students in a pretty seamless way. Thank you very much for attending this. Mine, thank you so much for joining us and giving your incredible and very practiced opinions on using Posit Cloud for this type of education. At this point, I'd like to invite back on Hannah, who's on our side and is going to help with the Q&A that's come on the board as we've been going through the presentation.
Hey, thank you. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Mine. Yeah, like Alex said, I'm Hannah. I'm on the marketing team here at Posit, so I'm just going to moderate some of the questions that have been coming in today. And just a reminder, if you still have questions, we've got a chunk of time here at the end to answer them. So feel free to keep on submitting questions and we'll just run through them as we receive them. But the first question that I would like to ask you both is from Sanjay. And he asked, if you were asked the top reason for what you like about Posit Cloud, what would be your response?
I think Mine should answer this one.
So I think I have the top reason I would say is being able to peek into student projects so easily. I think that feels like a superpower. Even when you're not with them, you can do this. This was incredibly helpful when we were teaching fully virtually a couple of years ago, but I still find it very useful even though teaching is happening in person. But I have to add that second reason, which is the fact that everything is like a contained project. So students don't have to worry about sort of file paths and where they put their files. You set up the file structure for them and they start computing in there, which I find to be very helpful for new learners, as opposed to sort of bogging them down with those details as well on day one of class.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is the flexibility of spinning up new courses, of adding and removing students. Like, it makes it very easy to sort of build that cohort that you want to see the content that you're putting together.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Next question I'll go to. When I share with my students a project, all installed R packages are available to them, but that does not seem to be the case with Python packages. Is that really the case, or is there something else?
I think if you're using Jupyter Notebooks, the best thing that you can do is to set up through the templating functionality that we looked at. So for sure, using that templating functionality, you start a new Jupyter Notebook project, You bring in all the packages that you want to. And then if you set that as a template, your students are going to be able to access that project with all those pre-installed packages that are there.
Awesome. And then I think you answered the next question, so I'll skip that one and go to this one. Is it possible to publish on Posit Cloud, say, an HTML document generated from a Quarto notebook that can be shared publicly and anyone with the link can access it?
At this point, no. All sharing on Posit Cloud has to go either to somebody within your space or to another person that has a Posit Cloud account.
Next question from Ralph is, if students want to access their work after a workshop, I conduct corporate training for other companies. What are the options besides just keeping them as a student in perpetuity?
Minnie, how do you handle sort of content transfer during your courses?
So I think one of two things. Some students can choose to transfer that project into their own workspace so they can move it. More often, I also have students who just export the project out like locally. So they make sort of a local folder of all of their work, whether it's from a workshop or a course. So that exporting and then like keeping a copy of it locally is another thing that I've done. And then the other thing is, if you're also teaching, like if there is a GitHub repository connected to the project or the space, then not space, I guess the project to the project, the text files or the data files can be there as well. That doesn't solve the sort of the packages side of things, but at least it solves the other content.
Awesome. Let's go over to the question from Jason. Jason asked, I have an account for an academic researcher. Do I have to create a new account for teaching, or kind of what would you suggest?
I think it's going to depend on the level of teaching that you're doing. I know there's some limits on that academic researcher plan in terms of how many people can come into your space. I'd recommend either reaching out to us so that we can have a conversation about what exactly it is you're trying to accomplish, or checking out what those instructor plans look like and see if that could also meet your needs.
I'm going to jump over to a Slido question that we got a bit earlier. I think someone asked maybe a little bit more generally about just teaching data courses. They said, do you have a favorite piece of advice you've received related to teaching data courses?
I'll try to take this. So I would say, I think the best advice that I've received has been around trying to get a sense of like the background of your students, which is, in a way easy to do at the university level because there are prerequisites associated with the course, and these are like strictly enforced generally. So you kind of have a sense of the background of your students, or the lack of a background of your students in the content that you're teaching. But when I teach workshops, that's not necessarily the case. So something where if possible, doing a short survey where you can get a sense of what they know and what they don't know ahead of time, I find to be really helpful. And I'll be honest, that's not to say that then I tailor the entire workshop based on the data that I get from them, because that's usually not possible. People, sign up for a workshop knowing what the content is or having read what the content is going to be. But I think it does change how I articulate certain things and how much time I spend on certain details. So that would be one thing. And then the other thing is, I think live coding is one of the best things for teaching data courses of any kind, whether that's like a long-term course at the university or a short workshop. And with live coding, I find it really helpful to be able to do the live coding in the same environment that your students are doing it. Because I think one of the most frustrating things for learners tend to be, no, I ran the same code you ran, but I'm getting different results. And it's never exactly different results, but maybe something looks slightly different, or they're getting an error because they haven't installed a package that you have installed or something like that. So just being able to sort of do the live coding in the same environment is really important. So I think one of the sort of the best pieces of advice I received was to do more and more live coding, and anything that facilitates that I find very helpful.
Yeah, the one thing that I heard was don't try to teach too much. Like when I first started teaching, right? And like I was given a textbook and they said, this is what you're teaching. And I tried to teach every single thing in that chapter, where especially like at the intro level, I found like you want to get people's appetite up for data. You want them to be excited enough to go on and learn bigger and better things, and cramming everything down their throats in a limited period of time wasn't that helpful. I mean, I also mentioned like running a survey to understand them. The other thing that I would recommend that I thought worked well was making the data that they're initially looking into, especially for people that don't really understand data at all, data that they generated, because then they really understand where it's coming from and what it is. And this can be as simple as saying, an anonymous survey and then throwing up, weight and height and turning that into like a correlation, regression type analysis, because people can see their data turning into something meaningful right away. And I found that was always useful.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. So I'll go on to the next question that we received, and this one's from Nikki. She asked, what suggestions do you have for seamlessly utilizing Posit Cloud and Canvas LMS in a course?
Yeah, right now we don't have any formal integrations. I do know some universities are experimenting with ways of people exporting things from work on Posit Cloud and then uploading those into Canvas for subsequent grading. I don't think we've got a great use case there built in right now. Minnie, have you attempted anything, or are these separate environments?
Separate environments. So we also use Canvas, but my students will export their sort of PDFs of the assignments that they're working on, and then we'll upload them to Gradescope basically, but they're doing the exporting and uploading. We don't have a sort of a connection between the two.
I think we made it through all of the questions we've received so far. So if you all have any more questions, feel free to drop them in and we'll wait a minute or so more to hang on the line and answer them. One thing I would share is that there's a library of past Posit Cloud Essential events that you can view at any time, along with the recording of this event if you'd like to go back to certain sections, and that'll be on our YouTube channel, and I'll share that link in the chat with you all.
Great, thank you, Hannah. And Mine, really, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you have another course to go teach in just a few minutes' time, so we really appreciate your time and your perspectives.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I don't see any more questions coming in, so I think we've answered them all, but thank you both so much for joining today, answering questions, going through this. I think it was super helpful. So thank you all. Thank you all for joining and submitting your questions, and we'll see you next time.
All right, thanks a lot.